Open your mouth. Spread your legs. Clear. Let's go.
Trap star Trizzy, dog in the yard. Today we bringing you a special episode from 3125 Park Avenue, reporting live in memory of Gunner, aka Joshua Johnson. Today you get the chance to be the guest of a special super legendary interview with Phillip C. who's a highly experienced trial attorney, and his practices range from criminal and civil matters across state and federal courtrooms. Some of his recent settlements and judgments, some of his clients was awarded six-figure settlements. I don't want to tell you too much, blow the surprises, so I'm gonna leave the rest for y'all, and I'm gonna let him tell it to me.
What up, yo? What do you know what it is? Your boy Pistol Pete. Welcome back to Dog in the Yard. Today we got Phil in the building. What's up, Phil? How you doing,
good,
brother?
my brother?
How's everything? Nice having you, man.
Everything's everything. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Just maintaining, man. Same old thing, working.
I see that. Well, it's good to see you, bro.
Staying motivated.
Stay motivated. Keep the community motivated. Everything you're doing,
Absolutely.
brother.
Yes,
Much
sir.
appreciated.
Thank you, man.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having me, man. Thank you for coming, man. Appreciate you, man.
Come on, man.
I'm on. So, like we was talking earlier, you have a lot of things going on, and it's always good to have good information. You know what I'm saying? Wisdom is everything.
Amen.
So I felt the need. I was like, we got to get Phil up here. We've been trying to get you up here for a minute, and we finally got you. And I'm, and that's it. That's what it's about. And a little bit about yourself, Phil, for those that don't know you, the viewers out there, let them know your little past, a little history about you and who you are and what you do, and your upbringing a little bit.
100%. So right now, managing partner at Hamilton Clark LLP. It's a Wall Street-based law firm that has a large focus on corporate and commercial litigation, but also a very heavy practice in the white collar and the criminal defense realm, right? And that has been in iteration since 2020 when I came together with my partner, Lance Clark, born and raised in Brooklyn, came up through the New York City public school system with respect to Lance in particular. And then, he went to Penn State. And then ultimately, once he came out of law school, came back to New York, did his thing at Legal Aid for about 8 years. And then ultimately, we linked. We linked because I had been practicing uptown in the Bronx, started my career at the Bronx Defenders in October of 2009. So I'm 15 years in practice now. Wow. I always have these clients like coming in like, wait, how long you been doing this? Like, no, 15 years. And tried some cases along the way, few jury verdicts, saving some lives along the way, right? Okay. But I think a lot of that comes from originally, in terms of asking where I'm from, born in LA, but raised on the west side of Detroit, right? Mm-hmm. Moved back to Detroit when I was like 1 or 2 years old, which is where all my family is. And, coming up in Detroit, it's a very interesting experience, right? And I have like a dual perspective because when my parents split when I was 10, my father moved back to New York. All right. My father's like a New Yorker through and through. Right. And he moved to Kew Gardens, Jamaica kind of area, what have you. And kind of coming up basically between Detroit and New York because I was always here in the summer times. Anytime I wasn't in school, I was in New York, just the way their custody agreement was or whatever. So I'm getting these dual perspectives coming up. Right. All right. And the thing about the west side of Detroit, east side of Detroit, whatever, you have like a lot of an entrepreneurial hustler spirit there, but not just even in the illegal realm. You had a lot of black people, all our grandparents that had came up from Alabama, that had come up from Georgia, that wasn't going to deal with the bullshit of Jim Crow and all of the, opportunities they couldn't get. You had a whole flux of those black people that like went to Detroit in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s. And it's just kind of like within our DNA to not take shit, right? And to always work for more, right. Like post that Harlem Renaissance, Detroit has like the highest rate of black home ownership in the nation, right? So you had like a lot of entrepreneurial, hustling, business owning, just we're going to do better than they ever let us do in the South type black people. That's what's always been in the DNA. When I used to come to New York, I think I started coming when I was like 9, 10, and I would spend my summers with my father. And what was always interesting to me about New York, way more diverse than Detroit is. Detroit's a very segregated city, just black and it's just white. And I would come here and spend my summers. And you got to understand, in Detroit, we don't know anything about Puerto Ricans. We don't know anything about Dominicans. We don't know anything about me walking on the streets. I used to go back into Detroit and tell my friends, I got these black people in New York coming up to me speaking Spanish, like Wesley Snipes complexion.
Yeah.
Right? Speaking Spanish. And I'm just like,
fact.
New York will just like, it'll fuck you up, right? In terms of just like what's going on there culturally, and you've never seen anything like it, but I loved it. And the city was like a magnet to me, coming here, spending those summers with my father, building my network. And so the one thing I used to always see in Detroit, though, was, you know, there, of course, man, just growing up, black mayors, black prosecutors, black police, everything was black, right? The federal judges, the lawyers, anybody that like, you're dealing with like at a high professional level. That when I used to come to New York, I would see a lot of black and brown people here, like way more so than back home. But I just felt like here we didn't have like the equity stakes and like ownership that I saw back home. And as much as I always loved New York, when Lance and I started Hamilton Clark, I think a lot of what went into the motivation behind that was, of course, to be there to help, you know, the young black and brown brothers that like are systemically getting it in the city. But I think also with him growing up in Brooklyn, particularly where he did, and not really seeing a lot of what I saw in Detroit, but then me coming up in Detroit, like we just had like a like mind of like building something of our own here. Instead of going to work and make everybody else rich at the big law firms, let's start our own. Let's be there for our people, but let's also be there to be able to provide sophisticated legal services to the corporate world, the commercial world. And my friend, that's how Hamilton Clark was built. And we're continuing to build it. We're continuing to add staff, continuing to save lives, and continuing to just change the game legally.
And how long y'all been doing it?
4 years collectively together. I mean, when you add all of our legal experience, Lance's been doing this for, 16 years? I've been doing it for 15. So, 31 years just between us, right?
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about our other partners that have spent, decades at big law firms. Yeah, just a lot of experience, brother.
So far, it's 4 years, huh?
It's been a crazy run.
Yeah, you got it.
It's been a crazy run, man. We do a lot of, commentary work with CNN, with MSNBC, cases we're dealing with these days, representing professional athletes, entertainers, corporate executives. We really are a lot of times, like when you're talking about like those upper echelon of individuals that when they do get into some shit, they can't let the world know that they've gotten into that shit. And who are we going to call to quash this, right? Like, who are we going to call so that this just quietly goes away?
It can be resolved quietly.
Correct. And like, we have kind of carved that niche out for ourselves, like in New York with the relationships that we have. In terms of any of the DA offices in the 5 boroughs, the U.S. Attorney's Office, there's always going to be a relationship or a call that we can make, even if it's like NYPD, if it's like the feds with respect to any of their enforcement agencies. We have enough experience, we have enough relationships to kind of help guide our clients. Not everybody's going to have their case dismissed. Not everybody's just going to get away scot-free, but in terms of navigating this system confidently and knowing that you're going to come out on the other side with the best possible outcome that you could get, that's where Lance and I have positioned ourselves, and that's where we've been very successful in Hamilton Clark.
Great to hear. Want to get into a little bit about the law, as far as conspiracy, some information. I know that you've been doing this for a long time, and like I always tell my friends out there, because all my friends, all of them is not always 9 to 5s, right? We have friends, they stay on the street. Mm-hmm. So I be,
the money's everywhere.
It's money, exactly. So I be telling, like, be easy, or, it's easy to go to jail.
It is.
Conspiracy is real. And I be telling them, like, conspiracy is real. Like, I be trying to give them a heads up, whatever it is. Just know that, I love you, man, but, conspiracy is real.
And are they understanding you, like, when you're really trying to, impart this knowledge? Like, are they feeling it? Are they understanding it? Or is it just like, yeah, I get it. Conspiracy.
Most of the time, you already know. When you in that zone and you out there in the streets, majority of the time, you don't really want to listen to it. Mm-hmm. You might listen to it, but you, at that point right there, cool. But you're still doing what you do. You know what I'm saying? So, it's like everything else, man. It's a hit. You accept it if you want it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then hey. Yeah. Good luck.
Well, they say you could lead the horse to water, but
there you go.
You can't be just throwing that head in.
With me, it's like when I have brothers like yourself up here with all the knowledge that you have, and you've been doing it for so long, I always want your information, because knowledge is power. So so I really want you to break down how easy it is, how, to go to jail for conspiracy, and how hard it is to get out.
Man, and it's so much easier these days, especially with these younger generations that, because of this, right? Scrolling all day, putting everything that they're doing in terms of their life, whether they should be or they shouldn't be, they're nevertheless doing it. And they're making life very easy for a lot of these investigative agencies, whether you're talking about just, state law enforcement, if you're talking about some of the federal agencies, that they literally, in lieu of, back in the day when they had to go and get, their confidential informants off the street, or, find some way to kind of like break into these organizations, or break into even just like these old school relationships that, you all came up together in school. It's not even necessarily a gang per se.
Right.
But you guys came up together. As we said, there's money everywhere. I think, though, what a lot of this young generation doesn't understand is that just because the money is everywhere doesn't mean that it's not a trap. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of money that's out there that's just like literally a trap to fall into this system. And the way in which the system operates to catch a lot of them is the conspiracy law, right? And I think a lot of times I find myself trying to have these conversations with clients in regards to, you can be vicariously held liable for the actions of others, right? So it's like if all of you get together and, you agree like, look, there's this money out on the street. We have this like specific supply that nobody else has, access to. Let's get out here, just kind of like make some sales, yada, yada, yada. And maybe that's all that you're thinking in your mind in terms of like getting a little money to come up. But you have certain people within the organization, certain people within those relationships that are making decisions that maybe you wouldn't have made yourself. Right. Maybe you wouldn't have, conducted that act yourself. But by virtue of the fact that kind of you were all in it together from a business standpoint, now you can be vicariously held liable for a lot of the acts and conduct. That can include if, a body's caught. That can include if somebody else is possessing a gun, right? And now you're starting to, catch some of these 924C charges. And it's just like, I never even possessed a gun. Well, it doesn't matter, right? Because your boy did, right? And it's like you have to have an understanding before you make all these agreements in terms of who you're dealing with, what they're capable of, because their acts can now be vicariously attributed to you, right? And so that's where these conspiracy laws like start to come in and start to catch wider swaths of people that aren't even necessarily responsible for the underlying conduct. I didn't shoot that man. I didn't sell that brick. Yeah. I didn't do that. I didn't do this. Why am I being made to plead guilty to this? Why am I indicted for this? Well, it's because like they caught you up in the grand scheme of the conspiracy, and that's what makes some of like what we're discussing in terms of going out there to just get any kind of money really dangerous. And it can cost you anywhere between 5, 10, 15, 25 years to the rest of your life, right? Just depending on what other decisions others are making that aren't even yourself. And like, that's a PSA that you got to keep trying to get out here. And, we certainly try to do our part to go and like talk to these young kids, not only just doing like the know your right stuff in terms of like how to maneuver and be okay when you're dealing with the police or making smart decisions there, but also just like keeping yourself out of these situations where you ever have to deal with them anyway. And understanding that a lot of these consequences that come, it's never going to be worth the consideration of like what you're getting, I think, when you're playing any of these games. Right. That's just my opinion based on what I've seen anecdotally,
You could just even just hang out with somebody that's been on the investigation, and it don't even have to be about no money, and just hang out with them for a couple of weeks or whatever, go out to clubs and all that, and you can still go to jail for that, right?
I mean, they can certainly arrest you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose at trial, but what they're going to do is like they're going to make life very difficult for you. What they're going to do is I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of like game theory, but within game theory, they always talk about this prisoner's dilemma, right? And that's really a lot of what the feds and like these higher level state investigative agencies do with everybody. Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with anything. I mean, I've known this dude since I was, 3 or 4 years old. We just happen to be out. We hang out a lot. But now you're getting scooped up, right, because of text messages that maybe, are being sent, or postings that are being made on IG, or what have you, that they're able to kind of twist what is really just innocent, we've been friends, that's been my boy type behavior.
Yeah, because I've seen it, yes.
Now they turn this shit into some, like,
that's what
this
I'm
is
saying.
You're guilty of by association.
Because you might be, the way they look at it is like, you knew what your friend was doing. And you know how that go. If you don't share what your friend's doing or tell your friend, and your friend happens to get caught, and you've been out there for 3 weeks, hanging out, going to strip clubs and going back to his house, then you should know the things that he do. Then right there, boom.
And these judges, I mean, the way in which a lot of them are is like, especially at the early stages of the case, they're not always going to err on the side of, yeah, you guys probably were just friends and maybe the government's just overcharging this or whatever. Like, You can't expect that to be the baseline judgment that a judge will make. A lot of times I find myself, and Lance finds himself, literally having these arguments with the U.S. Attorney's Office or with the state prosecutors in front of these judges, just saying, like, literally, you can't expect this man to know everything that's going on with his friend or every piece of, potential illegal activity that may be in his car or in his trunk or in a book bag that's been in that trunk for like 4 or 5 weeks. But what Lance and I always end up telling like a lot of these young people when we have conversations with them is, you need to know that. Don't get in that car just assuming that there's not anything in there that couldn't be ultimately attributed to you, right? Because if they do find some weight in the back, if they do find a gun somewhere in that car, everybody in there is getting arrested, right? And until somebody's either like snitching on someone else, it can be a very complicated situation, right? Like where you're just kind of sitting waiting for somebody to either take the responsibility for that or hope that then the government or the state isn't able to prove anything because nobody's, admitting to it. It's just, you don't want to be in that situation. It's a costly situation. It's a very expensive situation. And then in terms of like your mental health, something we were talking about, before we even came on the show.
What would you put yourself through that?
Come on, man. You're not trying to be in MDC. You're not trying to be in Rikers. It's just not, it's not worth it. I just don't think a lot of these young kids like understand those consequences.
And how easy it is.
Super easy.
Super easy to go to jail. Super hard to get out.
That needs to be a sign back here. Like super easy to go to jail.
Yeah. And it's super hard to get out. Very expensive, just like he said. If you don't have the right attorneys, the right funds, the right backup, you get lost in the system.
100%.
They'll give you whatever whatever's going to be right to to the eyes of the judge, and
or the jury that just doesn't understand your life, that doesn't understand. I can't tell you how many times like we've been on trial and the government starts putting up all these postings from people's social media, which is something I was alluding to earlier in terms of being careful about what you're posting on social media, being careful about who you're posting with on social media. But they'll like put up these posts, and I mean, I'll give you an example. Think about like the Southern District of New York, right, which is the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, which covers a lot of not just Manhattan, but Manhattan, the Bronx, Westchester, Dutchess, Putnam, Orange, all the upstate, more conservative counties, right? And then, you have a lot of brothers that are going, on trial because, they're from the Bronx, right? They're from, Co-op, they're from, Uptown. And culturally they move in a way that, when some of these jurors from Westchester are like looking at these pictures, they're scared. They're not even hearing the facts of the case. They're not even hearing, right? What you didn't do as much as, you look scary, and people that you hang with, you must have known they were in a gang and like doing all these things. So to your point, then you must be guilty, like simply by association. You know what those people were doing, so you just as guilty as them, and it's a tough fight. It's not an impossible one, but it's a tough one, and like I said, it's an expensive one.
There you go, guys. So just hope that you guys out there get that. You're getting it right from him. You know what I'm saying? It's easy, and it's very expensive. How you manage to, stay out of trouble? I know you have all your friends wasn't all good guys, right? I know you had trouble friends, growing up. You come from Detroit. Detroit's tough too. You was going to 2 tough places, Detroit or New York City. Yeah, and you managed to still pull through, stay straight, and become the person you are today. Great attorney that you are.
I appreciate that, man. I mean, I'm gonna give full credit where it's due. I mean, let's just start with my mom. She always just was gonna put me in a position where even during like tough times, like post my parents' divorce, and she lost the house, and me and her had to move in with my grandmother, right there on 7 Mile in Livernois. She always did her best to kind of shield me from any of those influences, even though clearly, to your point, of course they were around, right? I would say even more so on the west side of Detroit than in Queens, right? I'm just being frank. That said, she always made sure to just make sure that whatever dime she had, she put that like into my education and just making sure that I was okay. And then, my father, to his credit, with all that time that I spent with him, he always just showed me another side of the world. He did a lot of work with American Airlines, like in their VIP clientele services. So, he was always, for instance, like at JFK escorting Diana Ross to her plane, or escorting, Jennifer Lopez to her plane, or escorting just like, NBC execs, Jay Leno, you name it, right? And so because of a lot of the power he had at American, used to always have a lot of these corporate execs that would like do a lot of favors for my father because they wanted him to bump them up into first class or to bump them up into business class or whatever. So, we used to go to all these crazy parties in Beverly Hills. I'm like 14, 15 years old, just seeing a side of like the world that like I wanted, right? Yes. So like it kept my focus a little bit more. Like if I want to get here, it opened my eyes. It's like, this is what I want, so this is where I got to keep my focus. But to your point, was it like that with all of my friends? Not necessarily. And I mean, the system even touched my family with two of my closest cousins. And when people always ask me, how did I end up doing this work? There's a lawyer in Detroit by the name of Steve Fishman. Okay. You know how like every like city, like say here in New York, right? You got like your Ben Brofmans, you got your Murray Richmonds, you got your, you got your names, right? So in Detroit, there was an attorney by the name of Steve Fishman that if anybody who was anybody got into anything, you call Steve, right? Like Robert Tractor Trailer, when he got into some of that stuff, he called Steve. Well, my cousin got into a really big situation in 91 when I'm 9 years old. Steve Fishman basically saved my cousin's life because it's 2024 now. That happened back in 91. Maybe my cousin will be getting out now. Maybe. Like if things had gone left on that case. But he won a very big suppression hearing before the trial started. And like watching them kind of navigate that whole situation and remembering kind of like the mental stress that my cousin was going through, that for me was a very big, like, I think that's what I want to do. I want to do what Steve does, right? And
that's dope.
I think also the only other part I would say is like one of my other cousins wasn't so lucky as that cousin. Right. And unfortunately did end up doing some federal time down in West Virginia. I mean, you can imagine like young black dude from west side of Detroit going to the mountains of West Virginia with all those prison guards down there and everything like that. And, just the worry that we had for him, the anxiety, the stress, worrying about your family like that. He's come out on the other side of that. And like his life is just taken off because like, unfortunately he had to go through that experience to just see like, it's not worth it. Right. I was just fortunate, I think with my mom and my dad, I was able to see that it wasn't worth it before I ever even got into it. And then of course I was older than my younger cousin. So when I saw our older cousin going through that, it was just stuck in my head a little bit more than I think with my younger cousin.
I got you.
But yeah, I mean, I had to kind of stay on the straight and narrow because I could, from a very early age, just see consequentially.
Yeah, good thing that your parents took you out the, out the environment, Beverly Hills, opening your eyes to other things that you like, wow.
If you don't see it, then you don't really know.
The world's bigger than, than just around us sometimes.
There you go.
Unfortunately, a lot of our folks, we ain't had no money. Times is tough. Upbringing is, rough, whatever, and you can't go nowhere. So, at least
if you can't go nowhere, you can't see anything. You don't have different perspectives in terms of how to maneuver. Yeah.
And then a lot of times, a lot of folks, a lot of our parents, they was ignorant themselves. They was, like, let's just be real with it.
And it's not even their fault. I think that's what's so frustrating.
It's not even their fault. Nah, it's not even their fault. I have to definitely put that out there. It's definitely not their fault. I just think it was just upbringing. I mean, I guess lack of education. It wasn't as much.
Lack of education, lack of experience. When we always talk about like this generational wealth and all this type stuff, I think what always gets to me is just it's not so much even just about the money. It's about the knowledge. It's about you have like 200-300 years of like, what I'm saying?
So true.
Not being enslaved, not like dealing with like coming out of that and then start. I put it to you like this. I remember I was in Puerto Rico a couple summers ago. I was playing Monopoly with my son. We had already gone around about 3 or 4 times. My stepson then comes in. He's like, "Oh, what are y'all playing?" I'm like, "We're playing Monopoly." He's like, "Oh, can I play?" I'm like, "Bro, we're already like 4 times around. We got hotels, we got houses up. Like, you can get in if you want to, right?" I mean, so he started the game. I mean, as you can imagine, he's bankrupt by the second go round. You know what I mean? Because like we've already built up our society. We've already got our stuff.
Y'all moving.
But for a lot of black and brown people, like analogously, that's how it was, right? Like whether you was coming from like your parents came from PR in like the 30s or 40s and came over here, or, you know, like the Dominicans, you started coming over here in the 50s and 60s, you know, black people finally getting rights like around the 60s. It's kind of hard to start the game when it's already been going around for 200 years and all this stuff's been built up. So how did your parents get the knowledge? How would grandma get the knowledge to be able to impart to you? That's what sometimes it's unfair, but, you know, we can't sit over here and cry over that, man. You just got to push through.
True. I want to also ask you, what other cases you have worked with? I mean, you know, you worked on anything else, you know, like anything in any other cases that you have in mind that it was like something that you remember, and you know a tough one, and you, I know you probably have a whole bunch of them. You have 15 years, 15 years plus. You have a lot of cases like that, but you know,
like which one sticks with me?
Yeah, like you know that you like it was a tough one, but you managed to pull through, or it managed to work itself out in at the long run. Man,
there was an attempted murder that allegedly occurred on 157th and Walton, like right across from the park that's like behind the civil courthouse in the Bronx.
Okay.
That was like a 2019 case, but I think what was so crazy about that case is that like my client, she was a magna cum laude graduate from Ohio State University. She had gone to high school with LeBron James at St. Vincent St. Mary in Ohio. She had like a master's degree in economics. She at one point was like an executive accountant with, let's say, like Con Ed here in New York.
Yeah.
The version of Con Ed in Ohio. Right. She was like a very high level executive accountant like at their Con Ed. And she gave up a very like lucrative career out there to come over here and like chase her music dreams, right? Like she always wanted to get into like the music industry and like particularly like on the logistics side and the representation side. So she, you know, she comes to New York, and long story short, man, she ends up getting involved with someone over there, not even so much like in a relationship sense, but like literally just off some like you're my weed guy type stuff. Yeah. Something went left with them. And ultimately, she got arrested for shooting him in the back twice, right? What the fuck? And I think what was probably so crazy about that case is like when that dude got shot in the back, I don't think that he would have ever thought that, you know, this kind of nerdy magna cum laude graduate from Ohio State, right? Who, you know, just she's a very docile, like pretty chick, right? Like you wouldn't like. It's not like she was like what's the name from Set It Off, like Queen Latifah's character. That's not who we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about a girly.
It's a girly girl, man. Like almost like a sorority type sister. It's like almost like if Kamala pulled a gun on you and shot you in the back twice or something like that. It was like that. Yeah. And let me tell you, navigating that case with her over the course of 8 months, she was in Rikers that entire time, pushing that case and, you know, trying to ultimately get that trial, which we did in May of 2019, 2.5 week trial. Thank God we came out on the other side, got the acquittal. It was insane. Whenever I had gotten the acquittal, I come out of the courthouse, man, and the jury's all standing outside, and they give me like a standing ovation. The jury, right? And so, you know, I came out and they were just like, you know, we were proud to save this girl's life. Like, you know, we understand exactly what happened. Like now that you've presented everything and on the other side of the facts. But let me tell you, I think what was so difficult for that case was like, she was, you know, from the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. And like, there was just like a lot of connection there of like, I can't let you do 25 years in some New York State prison. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just can't. And like the fight I had to put in that one is just one I never forget. Yeah.
Congratulations, man. That was good. That was a good one. Anywhere where people can find you, locate you, you know, people that's in trouble out there that might need your help, your assistance. I mean, anything you want to share, this is the time to just share anything as far as where your office at, telephone number, Instagram. You know, all the guys, any viewers out there having any issues, problems, you know, this is a guy right here to reach out to.
We're happy. I mean, I think for Lance and I, like what we love about like what we've built is, again, so many of our roots come from the place of like, we never put any black or brown people in jail, right? Like you have a lot of former prosecutors that kind of switch over sometimes to becoming criminal defense attorneys.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you can imagine when they do that, what are they coming over for? Because if you were ever cool with putting black and brown people in jail, like if that was ever something that you were okay with, I think to come over on the other side and be like a passionate fighter, right? To understand how to navigate a criminal defense case, I just don't think is as much a part of your DNA as it is with me and him. Like our roots have been from the defense from the inception, right? Like we've always been about, even before we were making any money, right? Like protecting our people. So, you know, I think for us, that's what's like giving us the niche. And it's why I always try to tell everyone, like, yeah, if you do ever need to kind of talk something through or think through a decision, like we're here. And more specifically where we're at, I mean, you can find me on Instagram, ESQ Hamilton, at ESQ Hamilton. Same, you know, on Facebook. We are located 48 Wall Street, 212-729-0952. We're all over the city, but we also deal with cases like all over the country. We just wrapped up a case in the Northern District of Georgia, which is where kind of Atlanta is. We have been into the Eastern District of Arkansas. We've litigated cases in Rhode Island, California.
So you only just
Virginia.
deal with not only criminal cases.
Not only criminal cases. So we have like a plaintiff side practice, but we also have like a big like corporate defense practice where we represent, you know, companies, including some Fortune 100 companies in litigation. We're very known as like an effective and boutique trial shop, right? Like for like if you have to try a case, there's a lot of lawyers out here that don't try cases.
Right.
You know, they throw on the suits, they look all the part and everything like that, but you put them in front of a jury, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to talk to people. They don't know how to be persuasive. Like we are a trial shop. If your case is going to trial, when you're past the point of negotiating and getting a plea, this is like specifically where we come in. We're fantastic negotiators as well. And of course we want to keep our clients from ever getting to the point of that risk. But like if you are ultimately going to trial, especially in any of the 5 boroughs here in this city, like we're bar none.
Okay. What you think about prison reform?
I think the only reform I've seen in my life when it comes to prisons has been the inverse, right? Where it's like, whereas we want a lot more reform, like in the positive, what have we seen over the course, let's just say like, at least of my lifetime, right? All the programs with respect to, you know, being able to get an education, a lot of that's been taken away, right? A lot of the programs with which, you know, you're able to kind of just mentally start to like untie a lot of the trauma maybe that you dealt with like as a child or that you dealt with in your family that led to decisions that you made that like got you in jail, you know, therapeutic services, all these kinds of things. We've just seen so many things taken away that then you have a lot of these brothers that come out and we wonder why the recidivist rate is what it is, right? Because what have you done to get, you look at some of like these European countries like Sweden and stuff like that, when people like go to prison, it literally is all about like reform, right? It's about like, let's give them the education, let's give them the tools that they need so that when they come out, they can be productive members of society, not coming back in here. We don't operate like that here in this country. Like it's just all about retribution.
We're so far from that. We're trying to get to that right now, but it's so complicated. Like we was talking before.
That's why I respect all your work.
Yeah, like
that's why I'm here.
It's super complicated because not only dealing with the, you know, with the young men and people in prison, but you're also fighting staff. And it becomes complicated, you know? Super
complex. And like staff that, as you and I were discussing, they're not from, you know, the cities. They're not from like in any kind of like urban environment or used to dealing with like a lot of the people that go there. Like I said, my cousin was in West Virginia, right? Like these little mountain hillbilly, you know, prison guards.
They can't relate to anything.
Nah, they can't. And like they'll make your life hell. And unfortunately, they have all the power. You know, we've done some, you know, lawsuits on behalf of prisoners. In fact, my law partner back in November of last year won the largest verdict in a federal civil rights wrongful death suit for a brother that got killed by a bunch of guards up in, what facility is that? I'm sorry, like it's off my head right now. But basically just like further upstate. Yeah.
Clinton, Comstock, Attica.
Yes, Clinton. It was in Clinton. Okay. Thank you. It was in Clinton. So, you know, there was a wrongful death there stemming from like 2012, more or less. And, you know, he litigated the matter, came out on the other side, and got a great verdict. But the state, I think, was pretty confident that that wouldn't be the case. And that's why they took the case to trial, right? Because they're just like, when really are these kinds of guards in these kinds of like wrongful deaths. You know, unfortunately, like this guy had been beaten to death, and the guards were just trying to say, well, you know, we don't know what happened. I think we just tried to restrain him a little bit, and you know, next thing he's dead. But then, you know, you got the coroner and all these people coming to testify like, no, there's all these lacerations across his back and all this and that. So all I'm trying to say is, like, even with that case, it was difficult to get the verdict. It's just very hard to get like accountability once you're in prison and you're dealing with that staff and all this and that, right? Like sometimes these lawsuits are
you don't have a voice.
You don't have a voice. So to bring a lot of this change, and yeah, man,
that's very complicated too.
Super complicated.
Well, I definitely give it up to you, man. You guys doing a fantastic job. Appreciate having you.
Hey, brother.
You know what I'm saying, I mean, knowledge is everything. Appreciate everybody out there. You know what I'm saying, that tuned in. You know what I mean? I appreciate you, man, for coming, man.
Hey.
You already know, man. It's your boy, Pistol Pete, dog in the yard. Phil, you already know. Look him up.
Yo, welcome back to Dog in the Yard. See what I told you? Super legendary interview. Phillip, he ain't really too different from the rest of us. He grew up between Detroit, Michigan, and Queens, New York, overcame obstacles, and now he's a member of the Black Metropolitan Bar Association, and he's also an adjunct law professor at Benjamin and Cardozo School of Law. This is the stories of the people who had to go through it to get there. If there's nothing for you to go through, there's nowhere for you to be. Dog in the Yard.